Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the live stream. I'm starting just a little bit early, a minute or two early, because there's loads of people already here, loads of questions coming in. So let me get rid of some housekeeping bits and pieces, and then we can get stuck into the questions because there are so many questions coming in. So just a reminder, this is a live stream. So if you have a question, please write the word question, ideally in capital letters, because that means that I will spot it, amongst all the chat and whatnot. If you're watching this afterwards, this is not a video; it is a live stream, so you can skip forward. You'll see when I bring up, the questions, so you can skip forward on those. And if you don't know me, I'm Gary Bembridge, Channels Tips for Travelers. Try and do a live stream every single weekend. Next weekend, there may not be a live stream because I will be on Port Gauguin. I fly off on Wednesday and head off to Tahiti, Papeti. I need to check if that's the right pronunciation, or people can do it's Papiti. So I will check that when I'm there from the locals. And based on past experience, I know the Wi-Fi is not great on Port Gauguin. They don't seem to have upgraded yet. Ponant don't seem to have upgraded to Starlink, so I don't think I'll be able to do it. However, there's a small chance that I may do one on the Saturday before we board, because it'll be like 9 o'clock in the morning or about 8 p.m. UK time and so on. So keep an eye out for that. Let's get going. Let's talk about the t-shirt. I haven't worn this t-shirt for a while, actually, and I thought it was probably a good one to wear for a change. So let's get stuck into the questions. I'll start with one at the beginning, and then I'll come back to one that was posted just before we went live. So Greg Ma 60. It seems if you have some type of drone in your videos, and you might have noticed, I'll show you, like even there you'll see something. Sorry, I've got the question up, so you probably can't see it. Let me take that off. So you'll see, like, it appears to be some kind of drone thing going on, and so I get a lot of questions asking about that. So what it is it's what's known as an Insta360. I have actually an Insta360 XR3. So what it has, I'm not going to do a very good job, but it has this very long thing which is called an invisible selfie stick. So I'll make it slightly shorter to see. And then because you had videos in 360, and where it joins the two the images, this disappears. So you do have this sense of holding it. I'm trying to experiment with ways of doing it so I don't get that stuff, but it's really great. You can create all sorts of amazing effects with it, like those drone type effects. And it's good, of course, because cruise lines will not let you bring drones on. There's a couple of cruise lines that will let you take it on, but most cruise lines will not let you take it on. Like on Port Gauguin, for example, they said they won't even let you bring it on board the ship. Many ports are clamping down on your ability to use drones. So this is quite good. You can create those drone-like effects, and you can have some special effects. So I'm getting a little bit better learning it. If you want to know more about it, I've put a link actually in the notes of this live stream, but I do get asked about it a lot. That link, by the way, is an affiliate link, but it goes to the UK, so it's probably not going to help a lot of people, but you will certainly find out. So hopefully that answers your question. So let's get going. Kevin is asking the question. I'll say hello to people as we get going because lots of regulars are here. Kevin asking the question, what is Cunards USP, unique selling proposition? Dress code is an enforced, grills terrace poor compared to other top-end terraces. Queen Anne will change that, and that could even be a bit of a question mark. Sorry, Kevin, I have a slurp. Kevin, that's very interesting because you're absolutely right. Cunard's sort of point of difference used to be that sense of formal, dress, and they were very much about the evenings. They've reduced the number of those. They've become a little bit less strict in enforcing it. Their big USP, I think, in reality, is the British experience. It is one of the few lines that still has the true British kind of experience. They hark very much back to a traditional classic experience. But their biggest USP in reality, I think personally, is the transatlantic, the scheduled transatlantic on Queen Mary 2. That is their real true difference. Sorry, I've got a frog on my throat. sorry about that. But you're right, it's the dress code is becoming, for those people who love Cunard, the dressing up, it's becoming a little bit frustrating. I absolutely agree with you, by the way, that they are miles and miles and miles behind in terms of that sort of ship within the ship experience. In fact, it's very interesting because I'm just back from MSC, and their yacht club, even though there's lots of things I didn't like about MSC, because it wasn't quite the ship for me. But their yacht club experience in terms of the perks, the deck, the experience, the way they do that is way above what they do with grills on Cunard. So they have a lot of catching up to do. The big USP, though, I think in reality is that British experience, and it is the transatlantics, and it's going to be very interesting to when what do they actually do with Queen Anne. Now, Larry, I saw this question as well just before we went live. What do I think about the itineraries that combine Alaska and Hawaii into one trans-Pacific cruise? In specific, are they a good value and are they sufficiently flexible? Larry, this I think is a great itinerary. In fact, I was looking at it for next year, and actually cruise with David. Oh my goodness, how terrible! I've gone and forgot Ben and David. Can't believe I forgot the name. Cruising with Ben and David actually did that itinerary on the Norwegian ship, and I can't remember which one it is now. Whether you start in Hawaii, you do a bit of Hawaii, and then go across to Alaska. And I was actually looking at that for next year. There was also an Oceania. I think it was on Riviera did it as well. I think it's a great itinerary because you've got two of the most iconic places, I think, in the world, which is Alaska, obviously, and Hawaii. Now, in terms of good value, the prices looked okay. But I think it's because it's such a great, it's a repositioning cruise, but it's because it includes a lot on both sides. They did look pretty good value. In terms of flexibility, it did seem to have a lot of cause in good, iconic ports that you want to go to. I think it's a great itinerary. And the only reason I didn't do it is actually the timing didn't really quite work out. The Norwegian ship they were using is not one of their newer, more modern ones. But there were one or two other people that I think it's a great looking itinerary. And I'm really looking forward to Ben and David's videos coming up, because I think they're also on that with Steph. And there was some other vloggers who are on there, but I can't remember from there. Sherry's here. I see Beth's here, which is great. Good to see you here. So calling all ports with Andrew and Diane, if I remember correctly. What is your ideal cruise evening, entertainment-wise? We're not big fans of the big theatrical productions, but do love Holland America's Music Walk. We're also quite fond of a good cocktail pianist. So personally, my ideal evening entertainment is obviously, some sort of good food. I do like a show. I do quite enjoy, good production shows. I don't really enjoy the classic song and dance medleys around a theme, particularly not ABBA, please, too many ABBAs. So I find those a little bit repetitive. I do like on things like celebrity stuff where they've tried to advance those a bit more contemporary. So I do like a good show, and I like the casino. So I love the music walk as well. So I do like a bit of a show, a bit of a gamble. But to be honest with you, probably wrongly, but in the evenings, I tend to then go back to my cabin and I start spending time making notes, sorting out my video. So my evening is actually becomes a little bit of kind of more work stuff, which is probably not ideal. But I do like a good show. And it's interesting because when I go on a cruise with Mark, his definition of good evening is a really good meal, a show, and gambling. And those are the three things. David is asking, how close to a cruise day can you book, and does it cost more or less? So David, this is very much a shifting, evolving thing. Now in practice, you're going to find it more and more difficult to book close to a cruise, particularly in the big popular regions like the Caribbean, Mediterranean, and Alaska. And what you're seeing is the post shutdown and reopening is the cruise lines have all in their most recent earnings summaries have spoken about how most of their ships are now selling at over 100% capacity. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, ships have a capacity number which they declare, which is based on kind of basically fixed beds, which is normally double occupancy. So the actual fixed beds that they've got on board a ship, that will normally be your occupancy. However, as many of you know, there will be many cabins which have sofa beds, or you have these beds you can put out the ceiling or whatever to create kind of bunk bed kind of things and all sorts of things going on. So you can sell over capacity. And most ships are booked both for this season and into next season at over 100% capacity. I think I'm right in saying that Royal Caribbean is selling it on average about 103% and Norwegian about 101%. So you're going to find deals and buying things close more and more difficult to do, certainly on the popular regions, and also it's likely to cost you more than if you'd booked earlier, because obviously those is going to be limited retail, limited inventory, and they're not really looking to clear it because they're selling it over 100% capacity. So how close can you book? People say to me, can you rock up and book on the day? No. There's no one actually at the port selling cruises. You're going to have to book it online, or you're going to have to book it, through your travel agent or whatever. So I would say, the cutoff point will often be when they start closing manifests and stuff. But I would say, at least 2 weeks to 1 week before is probably the latest you should really be looking, and then you're going to have to go more directly through to travel agent. You may get, you may get some deals if they do really want to clear out inventory, but it is going to become much more difficult. It was much easier than before, and there are some cruises. For example, I went on this MSC cruise that I was on, that I was talking about last week, where people were booking 2 weeks before, because these are massive ships. And so they did have some inventory, and they were at very good deals. So a lot of it, but it was sort of out of season, so it's not as close as people think. So thank you very much, Bruce. Bruce has left a super chat. So with a nice comment there. When I get to it, I'll bring it up. So Bruce Cruz is a patron. Just a reminder, I do have channel memberships and I do have patrons, and also Bruce has a very interesting podcast, by the way. So if you look for Bruce Cruz. Not Booze Cruise, Bruce Cruise. And I was listening to one of his podcasts. He was doing some reflecting on his past cruising experiences, some group cruises he's going on, which I don't think was my group cruise. It was somebody else's group cruise. I think it was also 2024. But which also reminds me, I do have group cruises coming up. Maybe I'll talk about that later. Marpak, hi. It's quite often on here. I'm looking at the itineraries on Royal Caribbean's Ultimate World Cruise 274 days. So that, of course, is the first time that Royal Caribbean are doing a big mega world cruise. And it's got an amazing itinerary. It's very long. Linked to that, also, many of you might have been, because people have asked me about this, the cruise line, which was announced as 3-year round-the-world cruise, which is going to be bizarrely cheap, like £30,000, $30,000 a year or something. And people might have seen some reports where it all looked a little bit odd. It looked a bit like the Fire Festival. And if you know the story about Fire Festival, it's a big thing that never quite happened. And a lot of the management have left, and there's all sorts of funny things going on. But anyway, obviously with Royal Caribbean, you can rely on it much more. So if you're thinking about that, that'll be great. And I think that's next year. Brenda and Beth have said a few things here about congratulations on my 99th. So it's not my 99th birthday. I might look like I'm 99 today, but it's my 99th live stream. And I think I started live streams back during lockdown. And so my next live stream will be my 100th. And it will be from, my goal is to do it when I'm in the French Polynesian Islands. So if it's not next weekend, before I get on the cruise, it will be the weekend afterwards, because I'm doing the Porco Gang cruise for a week, and then I'm spending 5 days in Bora Bora, which will be really good. And I'm going to try and do, which I realize is, since the end of shutdown, I haven't, the people will say, oh, you're going to be next holiday, is when I go on a cruise, I never really relax, and I'm constantly videoing. My cabin stewards always say, where are you all the time? You're never here, because I'm always all videoing, and as I was mentioned earlier, backing up videos and writing notes and posting on social. So I think I'm in this trip going to try and take a little bit of a break, but we'll see how that goes. Now, Chad and Matthew have a really interesting question, also linked to Cunard. They're booked on Queen Mary 2 for Christmas, and that's a fantastic itinerary. It's one of those classic, Cunard been doing for decades, right back to the Q2 days. It goes out of New York on the 22nd, comes back, I think it's the 3rd, if I remember correctly. Christmas and New Year on the ship, beautiful ports and stuff. You want a private table for 2 in Britannia each evening. Now, Chad and Matthew, one of the challenges, to be honest with you, is there are not a huge amount of tables for 2 in Britannia. There's not a lot of them, and they are in high demand. So you're quite right. What is the easiest way of getting it? So what I would suggest you do, I would pick either early or late, as you said. If you want late, normally around 8:30. And the minute you get on board, and then you would request it through your booking. The minute you get on board, like, go to the restaurant and talk to the maitre d'. Having some dollar bills in your hand, probably not going to go amiss. and stressed to them that you want a table for two. Now on Cunard, tables for two are relatively close to each other anyway, but there are a couple. But I would pick a fixed time, because anytime dining is going to be much more erratic and much more unreliable. And the advantage you have on that on the cruises is a lot of families, groupings together, extended groups, so that may release it up a little bit more. But I would pick one of them if late's what you like to do, and literally get to speak to the maitre d' and see if they can get that. They may not be able to guarantee you for that first sitting, but they may make a plan. And as I said, show some dollars may do. Bill's here, which is great. Here, Bexalar, Hamilton, Ontario. We've got lots of Canadians in today, which is great. The Moonlight Adventures. Bill. So of course I forgot. Bill was on the Rotterdam. So it'd be good to know, Bill, how you got on with Holland America and the Rotterdam. I'd be very keen to know that. So here we are. Here's Bruce, as I mentioned earlier, who left the Super Chat and has he has a YouTube channel as well, and the podcast. And a couple of people commenting on the T-shirt. If only, yeah, that's true. Kathy saying if only they didn't count. So let's have a look. Aguila Calva, how can I approach cruise lines and propose them to create onboard reviews for them in exchange for a free cruise? They will not be interested, is the short answer in reality. What I would suggest, if you're looking to go on press trips or things like that, what you need to do is build up a big audience, first of all. So the first thing you need to do is build up a big audience. They're not interested in reviews as such, because they get gazillions of those on blogs. They get gazillions of people making videos on YouTube, and they don't really do that free cruising. However, if you have a big enough audience, number one, or secondly, you have a very specific audience. So particularly at the moment, cruise lines are very, very interested in attracting new people to cruising. So actually, if you have a blog or a YouTube channel that's perhaps about families, or perhaps about adventure travel, or something that's not a cruising channel as such, but are likely to show that you can bring new to cruises, then what you need to do is contact their PR team. Now, you can only find the PR contacts if you go to the cruise site, cruise line website, and you look for media center. Normally, they will normally have the contacts of the PR. So it might be a PR agency, or it might be someone directly with the agency. Then what you do is send them a little media pack, which will talk about your audience, talk about who they are, talk a little bit about, so it's basically some of the data, the engagement, your social media stuff, and basically pitch them and say, we think we can help bring new to cruises. Remember, new to cruise is the big thing the cruise lines are interested in. There's a massive big push to get new people onto cruise lines. They have lots of capacity to fill, and also with a lot of the changes, a lot of them evolving, Princess becoming more family, P&O becoming more family, and so on and so forth. So that's the thing to do. Then pitch them, and hopefully, if you have a big enough audience or an interesting enough audience, they may start to invite you on press trips. Now, I don't do press trips. Ironically, I get, in the last year, I've turned down 11 trips, 12, I think, actually, this week. Now, because people want me to come and cover it on the channel. Personally, I don't do, like many other people might do, I don't do press trips. I don't do free trips, because I want, for me, the audience, the viewer is my paymaster, if you like. So, but that's the way to do it. Sorry if I've spent too long doing that. I should probably write a little article, actually, because I do get asked about that quite often. And it's, if you're in Europe and the UK, there are actually more opportunities, because most of the cruise ships are built. In fact, all of the cruise ships are built in Europe. So what many of the cruise lines do is, when they come out of the shipyard, they often invite a lot of press, a lot of bloggers, travel agents to come on some of the shakedown cruises to view the new ships before they get sent to the Caribbean or whatever. So often, and of course it's relatively expensive because they don't have to pay transportation. Gillian Graham from Toronto, appreciating the cruise trips, which is great. So lots of Canadians in today, which is great. So James, All-time favorite cruise ship itinerary location, least favorite cruise ship itinerary location. Okay, so James, I think a little bit in my video I made around when I did my 100th cruise. So this cruise coming up is my 104th cruise. I touched a little bit on this, so I will try and cover these. So let me talk a little bit about my all-time favorite itinerary, first of all. That has to, when people ask me that, I would always say Antarctica, because it is the most magical, special place in the world. It is the one place that, although more people go to, but it's very just remarkable. And the story I tell to people is when I was on the first time I went to Antarctica, and I was just standing on the deck looking around, and we had quite good Wi-Fi. In fact, we've got even better Wi-Fi now with Starlink. And someone sent me a message. I posted something on social media and said, something about your once in a lifetime trip. And I thought, there's no way. This is so magical that I'm going to make this a once in a lifetime trip. So I went back just after shutdown and did the whole South Georgia thing. And I decided, before I leave the earth, I'm going to go again now, because I don't know when that's going to be. I'm going to leave the earth. I'm actually going again at the end of next year. So that for me is the most magical itinerary, and one that I would happily do over and over again. I do have other itineraries that I really rate. For me, the Panama Canal is, as a geek around that, is one of my favorite itineraries. Any excuse to go to the Panama Canal would be my second one, and then Alaska is another one for me. In terms of my favorite cruise ship, that's a very difficult one, because a lot of it is linked to my first point, which is around where I'm going. I do love Queen Mary 2 because it's the only one of its kind. It's a liner. There's nothing else like it. It's very quirky. It's very strange. It's probably not the best in terms of, like we were talking a little bit earlier, in terms of, the deck and that sort of stuff. But that probably is, I also like, and I do like small ships, but I think it would have to, I know Queen Mary 2 is not a cruise ship. Location, I've probably linked into that with that. I mean, one of the most magical things is sailing in and out of Sydney Harbour, which is almost emotional. Sailing in and out of Hong Kong, almost emotional. I don't know why. My least favorite cruise ship itinerary and location. So my least favorite cruise, I do not really personally enjoy massive big ships, but I like to cover massive big ships because that's obviously where most people cruise. So like, for example, my least favorite cruise ship I've ever on was a Costa ship. It's the only cruise that I've never truly enjoyed, but I want to go back to. I've got a challenge going with Fraser at Sea, who's actually just reboarded Costa. He's been on a series of Costa ships, because I feel I should go back and give Costa another go. My least favorite itinerary. I'll tell you what my least favorite itinerary was. It actually was just after shutdown, when the UK was one of the first countries to start cruising again, and the condition was that you either had to be days at sea only, or they could only go to UK ports and only UK residents. And I of course, I was so excited to go back. I booked 5 or 6 of them, and I got really bored of them because we had a terrible summer after having a great summer during lockdown. So it was cold and wet and raining, and we were basically sailing around in the English Channel, full of kind of Brits. So it was all the same type, rather than when I like on cruises, you've got Americans, Canadians, Japanese, South American. I like that sort of diversity. So that was probably my least favorite itinerary. It was a bit Groundhog Day, just going around to the English Channel in lousy weather. Location, least favorite location, probably linked to that. Oh, I've got someone from my hometown here in London, so that's great. Right, so Matt is asking this question. So I'm going to take a slug. Matt is asking, if itineraries are the same for an Alaskan cruise, is it better to do a one-way cruise out or round trip? Matt, very interesting. My personal preference is to do the one-way trip. And the reason for that is you probably get a greater chance of spending time in Alaska. So I've done the classic Vancouver to Vancouver, which I try and avoid, because Vancouver, getting through Vancouver can be very slow and very frustrating. It's obviously one. I think it is. I'm right in saying it's the most busiest and popular embarkation port for Alaska cruises. But you go through Canadian immigration and American US immigration, the Canadian Way, or whatever it's called, is not that massive. And if you've got a couple of ships in, and I've always found it really slow and frustrating. And it's nice. It's a beautiful city. I love Vancouver as a city. I prefer it north, but then you have, if you do the Inside Passage, you've got one sea day with nothing really much going on, and one sea day with nothing much really going on or anything to see. And so you then have, your port days. What I like about doing the one way, so if you're going from Vancouver to Seward or Whittier or the other way around, is you tend to have only really one inverted comma lost day. So, for example, last year, I'm confused with it. Last year I did Majestic Princess from Whittier down to Vancouver. So again, you get all the plus of going to Vancouver, and straight away we were doing Hubbard Glacier and Glacier Bay. So every day, just the one last day at the end. I've actually just booked another cruise for. I did a whole series of videos about Alaska, and it got me wanting to go to Alaska again. And this time I booked Viking, which is going this time from Seward, and it's a 10-day one. So because it's going to a couple of places that I want to go to, like Sitka and stuff. But again, there's only that one lost day there. So I personally prefer the one way. I feel you just get a little bit more crammed in. It's much more of a pain to get to be honest. Like getting to Whittier and Seward is a bit of a pain. Getting to Anchorage is a bit of a pain. Now, many of the cruise lines, though, if you book through them, they will often do a flight from Seattle straight up to Anchorage and take you down. But I'm booking some pre-stays. But I personally prefer that one way. Seattle to Seattle, you have, which is a great itinerary. Seattle's fantastic, but then you're building in a little bit more of Canada because you've got to do the stops. They tend to spend, because of the distance, you'll maybe spend more time in Victoria, which is again a beautiful city. So Moonlight Adventures heading to London from VA Beach. Is VA Beach? Not sure what VA Beach is, but anyway, welcome to London. Here we go. So here's a link to my, here's a reference to my upcoming trip. So as I mentioned, I'm going on Port Kagan. So we fly on Wednesday, spend a couple of days in Papeti or Papiti. Well, I'll make sure I get the pronunciation right. So any special tour excursions you're doing in French Polynesia? So the plan is, when we went before, we did mostly beach excursions because the beach is just so incredibly beautiful. One of the things that we did that we're going to repeat, we're actually looking at the light excursions. We can't book excursions to on board. It's quite frustrating. Because I like to plan, but they list they're just on the general side. They have the sort of excursions, but I know from last time when you get on board, they have more excursions. One thing we're really focusing on this time, I like the cycling excursions. Sorry, Alexis decided to chime in. So I really like the cycling excursions because you go through like a Morea, it's quite hilly, and they have nice e-bikes, and it's really interesting because you cycle through all the pineapple plantations. You go to like agricultural college. You go I can't remember what the name of the viewing point is. So it's those kind of things. So I like to do snorkeling as well. There's incredible snorkeling. So those are really the focus kind of things. We will do some beach runs. They have a great, Port Kagan has its own little island where they do a beach barbecue, which is great. And they also have their own little island in Bora Bora. But because we're spending some beach time in Bora Bora, we're probably going to do a little bit more get out, exploring kind of things. So, but if anyone has any better suggestions, then please do shout for those. Lizzie Lou is here as well. Lizzie Lou, I think I spoke about last week, was hosting those 300 solos last week. Daryl, going on a river cruise and Great Britain cruise back to back. How much clothing should I pack? It's for 30 nights in total. Now, on river cruises, they don't have a laundry room, but they will do a laundry service. And depending on the ship you're in, they will obviously have a laundry. They may or may not have a laundry room, but do laundry service. So personally, what I do, Daryl, when I go away, is I pack for a week. And then you just have to really think about weather stuff. So if you're going in the middle of summer, you're probably not going to have to take the advantage. You want to take a lot of warm clothing. Might want to, good zippy top or something like that. I take for a week. And on river cruises tend to not be massively strict on dress code, but you kind of want, decent pair of slacks or something. You can really get away with jeans, but it's better to wear kind of slacks, sort of smart shirts, collared shirts. And again, depending on what cruise you're on, if you're doing a GB, around GB, it's probably a princess or something like that. If obviously you're going to Cunard, they'll have a strict dress code. But I literally take that for a week. Aquila asking the question, what did you do for a living? I actually have, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I do have both on my channel members and on Patreon. So if you want to do that on Patreon, if you look for tips for travelers, there's actually links in this. Or channel members, you'll find on the videos there's a thing called Join. I have a video where I talk a little bit about my past and my history and how I got there. But basically what I do for a living now is, theoretically I'm retired, but my living now is YouTube, making content for YouTube full time. I do that. And what I used to be in marketing, and I used to be the global vice president of marketing at Johnson & Johnson for Johnson's Baby for most of my career, and then towards the end of that on Rock and the Engine. I have a video as part of the channel membership where I talk a little bit about growing up in Zimbabwe, being in the army, and all that sort of stuff. So it's very interesting kind of history, I think. People seem to find it interesting, but it's a very interesting way how I ended up here. So I think I've answered David's question around that. Brandon. Did you ever cruise Aida, Germany, especially the new Cosma? Now, I haven't cruised Aida. Aida is more of a challenge for English speakers because Aida is obviously very focused on the German market. And I have looked at a couple of times at Aida and had more mixed views around, I've been on Hapag-Lloyd, for example. In fact, I'm going for 3 weeks on Hapag-Lloyd on one of the expeditions. So I'm used to going on a more German ship where they do an international approach. So they do cater for a more international audience. Aida, for all the stuff I've read and looked at, is a little bit less international. So I haven't been on Aida yet. I would like to try Aida because I see the ships around a lot. The ships look really great. And so I don't know. So I haven't been on Aida, but if anyone has been on Aida, that would be good to know. And also particularly that, because I do want to try that as an English speaker, things like Costa. When I was on, there was only maybe 20 English speakers, and the rest were all Italian, and we had a little social hostess who looked after us, and it was a little bit challenging. So Peter, just going with a hernia operation on my settee. Well, hope that went well. Hope you get well soon. Hoping to cruise in September. Can you recommend any for the Mediterranean? So Peter, this is quite a difficult one. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you a short answer, but I will also direct you to, I have 2 videos, which I did, I guess last year now, updated on the Mediterranean, where actually a friend of mine who I used to work with, those about her, Winnie, who asked me a similar question around the Mediterranean. So there's one around choosing a Mediterranean cruise, and there's one around ports that you should do. So if you just go to the channel and you just search Mediterranean, those videos will come up. But basically, there are 3 key itineraries in the Mediterranean, one of which is the Western Mediterranean. So you're going to do your Barcelonas, your Rome, your chance to go to Florence. Now, all of these are things like ports like Livorno for Florence and stuff like that. You may do Palma, that kind of stuff. You then will have more the sort of eastern side, where you're going to do like Greece, the Greek islands, maybe Turkey. And then you have one of my favorite itineraries, which is the sort of the Adriatic, where you go between Venice and Athens. And of course, depending on the ship you are, it's not really Athens. You'll either be in the Ravenna or Trieste. But those are the 3 key ones. I always recommend to people, if you're going to the Mediterranean for the first time, I always recommend the Western Mediterranean. If you're coming from the UK, you can do a 2-week one from Southampton on lines like Cunard, P&O, for example. But mostly people will do it out of Barcelona or out of Civitavecchia for Rome. But the advantage of doing that is you will be able to tick off really iconic places. If you do a pre-stay in Barcelona, you might go to Monaco or Nice or Marseille, something like that. You'll go to Livorno, which means you can go to places like Florence and Pisa. You might be go to Cinque Terre. If you out of Civitavecchia, you can get to Rome. And depending which other ones you go to, other places you go to. If you go to Naples, you can go to Pompeii. So you get to tick off some of the most famous and iconic cities. Now, some of them are quite a long way away. It's a 2-hour trip or something. But I always think that's the best one. The itinerary I love doing is that Venice to Athens, one of the Greek islands, it's beautiful. You go to Croatia, you get to see some of the Greek islands. But I always think the first one, tick it off. In terms of cruise lines, anything, small ships, big ships, mega ships, they all do the itinerary. So a lot of it depends on your budget and your type of experience you want. You can go formal with Cunards, you can go informal, more party-like, adult only, with Virgin. They all do it. So there we go. So let's have a look. So Barbara is asking the questions. Only Barbara, I'm going to take a slurp. We're looking at a cruise to the Panama Canal. Some advertisers reposition cruises, others do not. What do you know about this? You really are the heart of travel planning. Well, thank you very much. So Barbara, I have a couple of videos about Panama Canal. We are dive into this in more detail. So again, if you go to the channel, search Panama Canal. But you're absolutely right. Many of the Panama Canal cruises are repositioning cruises. So they will happen normally when they're sending ships back from Alaska or to Alaska, fundamentally, is many of them. So that many of them will happen around the sort of the March, April time, or more the April, May time, right, when they're sending ships to Alaska. So again, from the Caribbean up to Alaska, or when they're coming back sort of at the end of the season, September, October time. So you'll find a bunch of those repositioning, and they'll normally run between Florida, Miami, or Fort Lauderdale, or Port Everglades, should I say. They'll do a bit of Caribbean through the Panama Canal, normally ending either in San Diego or Los Angeles or San Francisco, and then they do another leg up to Alaska. So that's the first bunch, and you're right, many of them, they will position as reposition cruises, because that's what they're doing. The ship's not coming back for many months. Many cruises you'll find will pass through the Panama Canal, and they'll offer you a leg around about the March time as well, because they're part of World Cruise Legs. So for example, the first time I ever did it was on Queen Victoria, when we were doing half of the world cruise from Southampton to Australia, and part of that was going through the Panama Canal. So you'll find a lot of those things happen. Your third option you've got is where they are specifically targeting a Panama Canal. So the last Panama Canal trip that I did, for example, and Oceania do this a lot, is they'll run a couple of cruises between Panama City and Miami, and they'll do those normally around January into February time, and they're 10-day trips, and they will basically start in Miami, go to Panama City, people get off, they'll change, they'll come Panama City back, and they do it backwards and forwards. And that's really a great trip. They tend to run one of their smaller ships like Serena and stuff, and they go through the old canal. So that's the second option. And that's really tailored around the Panama Canal, but of the Caribbean. The bunch of those are a little bit shorter. They'll be 10 nights. Those reposition cruises will normally be 14 or more nights, for example. So one of the group cruises that I'm doing in April next year is on America Eurodam, and then, which is in April. The cruise straight after my cruise is a repositioning, because they're then sending the ship to San Diego, and that'll be a repositioning cruise through that. Then the third option, Barbara, which is the partial transit. Now, Holland America do a lot of those. Princess do some of those. I think Celebrity are doing some as well, where it's normally a 10 or 12-day trip, and they will go part of the way through the Panama Canal. So they'll head up through the Gatun Locks into the Gatun Lake. The ship will turn around and come back down again. What you can then do is you can get off the ship, because they'll have excursions, go into the rainforest, for example. You can go on the train, or you can go on a much smaller ship, which will take you the rest of the way to the Panama Canal, and then they'll bring you back from Panama City to join the ship back in Colon. So those are the various different options. But you need really around about 10 days or so. Locador. Hope I've got that right. What cruise line do you recommend for Platinum Disney family looking for similar quality experience for grown kids? Okay, so Disney is obviously pretty unique with that whole Disney experience. So I assume that you don't want any of that big immersion kind of stuff. So in reality, the best ships, if you've got grown kids, in my view, the best lines to look at are Royal Caribbean and Norwegian. Now they are, many people would argue, Disney operates in sort of the premium category, whereas Royal Caribbean and Norwegian theoretically operated more in the kind of the resort mass category. However, they do have incredibly upmarket ships, incredibly upmarket cabins. But if you've got growing kids, if you've got teens or teens into early 20s, these are the ships that are going to have the most wonderful activities. You're going to have ice rinks, go-karting, the big shows, full-on Broadway shows. You're going to have huge amounts of choice, packed teen clubs, packed kids clubs. Those I would actually recommend, because in terms of, having been on a Disney cruise, there's the full-onness, the constant going on of stuff. Those are the lines that are going to have the most. And the most, attraction. Disney has so many different attractions, which are mostly more character-led. They're going to be more facilities and events led. So I think that's a good kind of one to transition to. What you will find, by the way, is if you look at what you're paying on Disney, you will probably be able to get an extremely high-grade cabin on Norwegian or on Royal Caribbean. You might find that even if you're going, I don't know what you're traveling on Disney, but say, let's take a veranda cabin. If you're normally traveling in a veranda cabin, you may well find that you can get a suite, an entry-level suite in the Haven, which is their sort of ship within a ship, for the same price. You're going to find an almost elevated thing. But those are the ones that I would do. So Deputy Get Some, I like that name. I'm sure there's a story behind that. I need to go look at your avatar or your channel and see what you've got. Is Royal Caribbean's coastal kitchen for suite guests comparable to actual specialty dining on the ship? I will be able to tell you a little bit more about that in a couple of months. In September, I will answer that question more definitively, because I have not done coastal kitchen on Royal Caribbean ship, because when I've been on Royal Caribbean, I haven't been in a suite, but I have booked on Symphony of the Seas in a suite, so I can do the whole coastal kitchen and stuff. Now, people rate coastal kitchen very highly, but the thing with specialty dining generally is, the suite guests, coastal kitchen tends to be very high quality, but specialty tends to be even more so, because you're paying surcharge, and often, of course, it's more focused around a thing. So I would say it would be extremely high quality from what I've heard people say, but I can't answer that definitively. Here we are, Papayeti. That's what Mark keeps telling me, Jerry. Papayeti. I need to write it down, because I'm a bit like you. I'm very good when I write it down as the phonetics. Is that phonetics? What do you call it? Papayeti. Papayeti. Yeti. It's the Yeti, but I get wrong, I think. KB in the UK. No questions this week. Say hi. It's very like you. I'm sure you'll think of some. I think you'll think of some questions soon. But good to see you. Good to see you here. So there we go. So questions. I feel like I'm getting repeat questions, but maybe it's people asking questions twice, or I'm just not scrolling fast enough. Rob, recommendation for a good value small ship cruise from the UK: Fred Olsen, P&O Arcadia, or maybe Ambassador. So if you're looking for a small ship, by small ship, we're talking like 1,000 or fewer guests, or even that side. I mean, you're probably really into the Fred Olsen Ambassador kind of level. So those, in terms of value, Ambassador is the best value by far of all of these. And Ambassador, some people love it, some people are indifferent about it. It's a value line. So, I think when people sometimes go wrong is, where I think people probably got frustrated with Ambassador, or maybe overly critical of Ambassador, is, it's really, really good value, but people are sort of wanting kind of a more, a food and a service and a stuff from a line that you're paying much more for. You know what I mean? It's like you need to calibrate a little bit. So Ambassador, I haven't been on Ambassador, but many people I know who have and have really enjoyed it. So Fred Olsen, I think their new ships particularly are attractive. I've been on Fred Olsen. I haven't been on their new Holland America ships that work from Holland America, but I'm seeing some very good stuff on those. P&O Arcadia is not that small a ship. It's it's a what's it called, a Vista class ship. They've added extra decks, and so it's 2,000 something. So it's not really a small ship, but it's a smaller ship. It's adult only. So the advantage if you want an adult only, I would tend to focus on Fred Olsen and Ambassador personally. Would be the ones that I would encourage. I would encourage you. Someone mentioned, yes, Janet mentioned the point that I did meet up with Don and Tony. So Don of Don's Family Vacations, Tony of Elite Loco. They were both on a Regal Princess cruise. And so I managed to get to see them at Heathrow. So basically, I knew that Tony and I have been, Don have kept missing each other because we're never in the same place at the same time. Obviously, Don living in Canada, Tony living in Florida, Tampa sort of area, me living in London. And we've never quite managed. We've sort of, even bizarrely, like, I think I was in Vegas the one day and Tony was arriving the next day. And then he was getting on a cruise once in Florida and but I was flying. And so we've always just missed each other. So when he was passing through, he sent me a message and it was great to get to see them. And I really was saying we need to try and almost sort of find out a way of, doing something, whether it's some group thing or something. People ask me, no, I don't still have a cold. I got over that, which is very good. Jane, thank you very much. Jane left a super chat there. Really appreciate that. So remember, if you've got a question, write the word question so that I make sure that I don't miss it. There's a couple that I think I'm probably missing along the way. Marcia, question. So both the questions I did make sure I saw that. Cruising solo, do you dine by yourself or are you placed at a table with other people? Now, Marcia, I probably always eat by myself and ask to eat by myself. For a couple of reasons. I'm very antisocial. No, I'm not antisocial probably, but I like, because coming back to a question someone asked earlier, I like to get a lot out of an evening. So the thing, if you're dining with other people, it's a much longer process. So I like to be more in and out. So I do like to dine by myself. But secondly, because I want to video the food or photograph the food and stuff, it's much more difficult if you put with kind of strangers. Because then you have to say, well, do you mind if I, take pictures of my food, and some people don't like and they get but whatever. So it's much simpler and easier. And then I can be doing things like start, pushing my food away to get a shot and stuff. So I tend to dine by myself. And also, probably because I cruise a lot, because I've been very fortunate, thanks to all of you watching my channel, which means I can then cruise more often. So I cruise quite a lot. So I often, if I'm dining, I choose my evening dining because I'm covering it for a reason. So I either, I'm trying a special ed restaurant, or I'm trying the main dining room, or I'm trying something. So I always feel I've got a bit of an angle. Now, I will, if I've met some people, people who follow the channel, and then I might go and dine with them, but mostly by myself. So I'm gonna have another slurp. Caden, that's how you pronounce it. Have you ever cruised solo on MSC? Yes. If so, do you have any tips? Yes, I probably do. So in fact, I'm just back. My last cruise I'm just back is from MSC cruising solo. The thing with solo is, these are huge, big ships full of lots of people. And my experience on MSC is, as a solo, so many people on MSC are actually traveling as families, because it's a very family cruise, or multi-generational families, or groups. So as I mentioned earlier, there was actually a group of 300 solo travelers through Passion for Cruises on that actual cruise. So breaking into and meeting people is, I think, more of a challenge on MSC as it is on any big ship. It's the same as if you go to a big city. It's actually harder to meet people than in a small village. So one of the things I would do is, they do have a solo meetup, which they do every night, every evening, normally. I think it's 5 or 6 or so. And it's normally hosted, so it helps break the ice a bit. I would go along to that, get a lay of who the solos are and so on. Also, a little bit to the point that someone else says, they are pretty good at putting solos on tables together or sharing. So it depends a little bit. If you are sort of if you're a shyish person, not very good at just starting to strike a conversation with people in bars or whatever, go to the solo meetup, go to the dining room and ask to share tables. Now, on most of MSC, it's set dining unless you bought one of those packages where you have anytime dining. So you may have the same people, and book excursions if you want to chit and chat to people. Look, on my last trip, I didn't really book excursions as such. So it's on excursions, it's much easier to start chitting and chatting to people. Trivia is always another really great way of meeting people, because often they're getting people to form groups in that. But I think on big ships, you need to almost sort of hunt out solos at the very beginning. See those people that you build replacements for. So Steve is asking the question around, so Queen Mary 2, Steve, is, so good to see you here again. Queen Mary 2 is due for a dry dock, and I've forgotten when it is. It's sometime this year. I feel like it's October, but I might be wrong, which would also make sense because it's sort of after the transatlantic season and before the sort of the Christmas season. But don't quote me on that. I need to double check. It's due for dry dock. However, we don't yet know what that is, because if there's going to be a refurb as part of that, because all ships have to go into dry dock at a certain period of time, and whilst many cruise lines will do refurbs in dry docks, not necessarily. Now, if I remember correctly, and again, I feel like it's on a relatively long dry dock, so it suggests some refurbishment. Queen Mary 2 is pretty outdated in many ways. Like the decor and some of the stuff is a little bit outdated. So I think a lot of it is the kind of cabins. You still don't have USB ports and stuff. So I feel it needs a little bit to be brought into what the modern traveler wants. Plugs and USBs by the bed, stuff like that. They have just installed, or in the process of installing, Starlink across the fleet. So things like, and which people are saying the Wi-Fi is so much better. The Wi-Fi used to be terrible. So I feel it's a little bit like an update. Now, there is talk of them replacing the what's the chocolate brand, all the Godiva and the Sir Samuel's, replacing that with more of a bar and stuff. So I think it a lot of it for me is around just bringing it into the 2024s and the way that people travel. And just tightening it up. There's still little quirks where, many of the bathrooms, which look pretty dated as well, still have little ashtrays and things like that. So I think that, for me, that is the key thing. And then it's a bit of a spruce up. But I think a lot of, for me anyway, I think it's the cabins. They did a decor remake of the cabins, but the bathrooms and things, for me, are the things. And we will see what they will do, if they're going to change any of those venues. And I think it's going to be interesting, because I think when we see Queen Anne, we're likely to see a new interpretation of kind of the decor of Cunards. So we'll see how they, cascade that into the cabins and stuff on Queen Mary 2. HK, I'm a new subscriber. Thank you very much. I booked a back-to-back crossing Queen Mary 2 for summer next year. Do you have to disembark with all of your luggage in the US, and when can you re-embark? So HK, I will tell you what my understanding of the current situation is. And it did change a little bit post-COVID, because many of the rules after the shutdown were requiring people to get off and get back on and stuff. But generally speaking now, what happens with back-to-backs is, it sounds like it's going back to how it used to be, where you assuming you've got your same cabin, so back to back, you did have to get off the ship and sort of go through some of the immigration and whatever process and get back, and you could get straight back on again. So I've done some back to backs before, where we literally we were checked all the way through, and we actually got off to go into New York to do some sightseeing and stuff, and just came back. But we were doing Caribbean, top to New York, and carried on. So I don't know whether that. So it was counted as it was different cruises, but we didn't have to go through any of the palaver. We didn't have to pack. We didn't have to do anything. We literally got off, went through, and came back in. And that's my understanding. It's a much simpler process. You don't have to pack up all your stuff, unless of course you're changing cabins, but you won't have to take it off the ship. So Bruce, here we go. I mentioned that. So just a reminder, write the word question again. NCC 638. What kind of entertainment can I expect on a transatlantic? Will I only find it upon boarding? So it depends a little bit what if you're doing a Cunard transatlantic. They have a pretty set approach, so you can look at what other people are doing. You can go into if you go into the Facebook groups, and ask people who are currently on transatlantic, the entertainment. They will have 4 enrichment speakers. They will have the same shows, because the same shows are the same shows on cruise ships they are on for years, and those shows will be on. It'll be the same mix of trivia, dance classes, that sort of stuff. So the transatlantics on Cunard will be the same, and the 4 speakers will change. Now, you can generally find out who the 4 speakers are before, because either it will tell you in your pre-embarkation documentation, or often they will talk on the website. They'll list this. If you're going on a transatlantic as part of a repositioning on Norwegian or Royal Caribbean, you're probably going to find out once you're on. But the shows, the big production shows, will be the big production shows. What you won't know is things like the guest entertainers and stuff like that. So hopefully I've answered that. Oh, Hetty's here. So hello, Hetty. So Hetty's doing a big mega Holland America trip, been all over the place, and was in Dublin yesterday, in Liverpool today. So hopefully the weather's been good up in Liverpool as well. So so Billy's asking the question around, at one point, I think you said using an agent was mostly better in case of cancellation. Is this still the case? So I use a travel agent for everything I book. In fact, it was really strange because Viking work with some agents, and I know they work with some agents actually in the US more. It seems in the UK. I don't know if they work with some agents in the UK, whatever. Anyway, I wanted to go on Viking very specifically, so I had to, for the first time in many years, actually contact the cruise line directly, because I also didn't. They were offering a thing where they were selling a package to Alaska which included flights, and I didn't want flights because I wanted to go to see some of the people in the US, and I wanted to use air miles and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I had to phone them, and it was like such an ordeal. I'm not being fair to Viking, just because normally I say to Sarah, this is what I want, and no, she'll go and do it. Yes, I think it is still easy because they pick up all the flack, all the issues, all the hassle. So I get messages every week where someone's had cancellation or something changed, and they spend hours trying to get hold of people, or they want a straight answer. So people contacted me recently where they want to get off a cruise early, or they, for example, someone sent me a message yesterday where they wanted to use cash, not a credit card, but they couldn't work out, and they'd phoned the cruise line, and the cruise line couldn't really tell them. So an agent can find all that stuff up for you. So the advantage of cancellation is they will chase all the future cruise credits, they will chase all the replacements. So it just becomes their problem. So I do think it is. Jane asked the question, what is the best way to get early boarding if you've purchased a balcony cabin? Thank you for your channel. So Jane, this varies a lot based on the cruise line. So for example, if you've booked on Princess or many of the cruise lines that have an app, one of the things I would say is, first of all, take a look at download the cruise app and look at the app, because on some of those you can choose your embarkation time. So Princess normally will allow you to choose an embarkation time. So that's one way you can choose your embarkation time. So that's one thing to look at. Secondly, balcony cabins, often it will be people with status, suites, balcony, ocean view inside. It's sort of that sort of hierarchy normally is the timing. But so you'll probably be early on. But then secondly, linked to that is then look how strict the cruise line is around timing. So you'll find the bigger the ship, the more strict they tend to be. So many cruise lines will say, like, if you're allocated a time, do not come before, because we will not let you get on before. So they will have a very set time. And I've been to many embarkation ports where you will see a sign which says 3 o'clock boarding or 12 noon boarding, and you basically line up by those signs, or they will not let you in unless you've got that particular timing. So check how strict your line is, because if your line is not particularly strict, you'll find you can go a little bit earlier, and you won't be kind of chased away. The other thing to do is, if you book through a travel agent and you get an embarkation time, is just ask them to push back for a different time. But so those would be probably the 3 ways. If I think of something else, I will do it. Victoria asked the question, do you know if Cunard has solar cabins? Yes. Not very many. I can't remember how many it is, but it's a bit like the Elizabeth and Victoria. There's not many of them. So solar cabins are going to be a bit like, you're going to have to get in really fast. Someone's asking about ship stability. I suspect I've missed that question. Sherry saying, I think you should give away that T-shirt. Give away a T-shirt. I mean, do you mean this T-shirt for my 100th live, or just a T-shirt generally? Victoria saying, envy's going to French Polynesia. Let's have a look. I'm taking a little quick slurp. Monica, in general, I have to take my vacation days outside of Europe high season. What itineraries / cruise lines would you recommend in March or the end of October without long flights? I'm from Europe. Okay, well, in reality, you can get some quite nice European itineraries, Mediterranean itineraries at that time, Monica. So, for example, Greek islands, that one I mentioned earlier, if you were here earlier, between Venice and the Greek islands, or just around the Greek islands, in October is a great time to go. So I've actually done that itinerary mostly in October, particularly the early part of October, because you're talking early 20 degrees Celsius kind of temperatures, normal still sunny days, not manically busy, things are still open. So that's a really great itinerary to do around that time. I've done more of the Western Mediterranean in March, a little bit more unpredictable weather-wise, as you know. Now, the March time is also still quite big in the Caribbean, but you are starting to head a little bit into what I guess very what they call it now. Oh my goodness, what have I forgotten to call it? Like spring break time. I think happens around March, so it can be a little bit manic. And October, it was also the very end of the season in Alaska. It is starting to get more cold in Alaska. It used to end more September, now into October. So, but again, that is a relatively long flight. So I would look probably at those ones. Hopefully that would answer. Let's have a look. Question. No name. Hi there. Is that itinerary the better focus, or quality of the line and condition of the ship, or the type of democratic people-wise? Didn't have that much fun, but it was a pleasant luxury cruise. So I feel like I might have missed an earlier question, but I'm not 100% sure if I have missed an earlier question. But for me, it's like a combination of all of those. So I will often, for me, that the line is really, really important. So I just been to the Norwegian fjords. I went on MSC because I wanted to go on MSC, but I didn't enjoy the fjords as much because I was on MSC, because MSC wasn't the line for me. I also went to Disney because I want to try Disney. I went to the fjords, same thing. But I'm going in July on Windstar, which is a smaller ship, and I'm going to love it. So for me, it's a little bit interlinked, because the best way to see the fjords is on a smaller ship, which is going to give more enrichment, go to smaller places, have more interesting kind of excursions. If I'm going to the Caribbean and I just want lots of sun and beaches, and it's more around what is, I want a great ship that's going to get me to those places, and it's going to be a nice enough ship at a good price. So for me, it's always a triumvirate. To your point, though, the demographic is linked into that, and it's really important, because like I went on the Disney. I'm going to use Disney as an example. I went on Disney knowing that I would struggle a little bit on Disney, because I don't know Disney. I knew it would be lots of families, already Disney mad people, not mad people, but people who are crazy about Disney. It would just be too much of an overlap. But I went because I wanted to cover that. I went on MSC. It was packed full of families and kids again. It wasn't right. So for me, that's an important element. So I know, though, that if I went on a Disney Transatlantic, you're going to have a very different demographic. So it's a little bit of a triumvirate, but and I think they all are equally important, because I think both who's on board, the kind of experience you get, and the line makes the itinerary. So, for example, I've mentioned the Norwegian cruise, the Norwegian fjords example. I know one of the best. I'll have a much better time with that combination of a small ship. All itineraries are much more, hiking, cycling, exploring kind of excursions. The people on Windstar are a little bit more that kind of mindset. So, that's a little good triumvirate. I'm going to Japan on Regent because they have the most amazing excursions, which are just really huge choice of great excursions. Very immersive. They're very good at, I know there's lots of enrichment. There'll be people who are very into exploring the culture and stuff. So it's that little kind of triumvirate, if you like. Wow. So we have now churned through huge amounts of time. So it's up. I know there are more questions. I will take a look at if there are any other questions that I've missed. I will try and answer those in comments or in shorts. I've tried to do more shorts, one of which just went completely crazy to 1.7 million views or something bizarre. So I will keep a look at those, try and answer many of those. As I mentioned, I am not sure if I will have a live stream next week. I'll see how it lays, but there will be one in 2 weeks' time, definitely, from French Polynesia. It might be a little bit later than normal, because I realize it's 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning to do this time. So it might be more like an 8 o'clock UK, whatever, 3, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Thanks very much, Jack, who's asked a question. He's done a little super chat. What do you think of cruises for singles? Are they ready to swinger cruises? Jack, no, unfortunately, if you're looking for that, there is a swinger cruises. There's a very specific website for swinger cruises. Solo cruises, I think a lot of people go thinking they may be there for romance. It doesn't really happen. Passion for cruises do have 300 there. I'm sure some people found a bit of love and whatever else there, but no, it was about people wanting to go and cruise and stuff. So, but swinger cruises, there are swinger cruises, and there are sites if you search for this. So it's cruises for singles. If you go on like Passion for Cruises, do lots of solo cruises. Vacations do hosted cruises. I think particularly if you go on those kind of hosted cruises. So no, in my experience, not. But there are some very interesting tales of swinger cruises that are worth, if you're really interested in that, Jack, go and take a look at some of that. I discovered, by the way, swinger cruises originally because I had a video that every few months would rocket in views, absolutely rocket. It was for MSC Divina. And what would happen is MSC Divina would host swinger cruises, and the people who ran swinger cruises would put the link to my tour of MSC Divina on their website, and literally it would explode. It was amazing. There you go. Of course, as everyone knows, if you're looking for swingers on a cruise, a little tips for travelers for today. If you're ever looking for a swinger on a cruise, look for a pineapple on the door of a cabin. That is the sign for swingers. So if you like pineapples, do not put pineapples on your cabin door unless you're looking for a swingers cruise. So anyway, thanks very much for joining me. Have a great rest of the weekend. As I said, hope if not next week, keep an eye out for that, but it will definitely be in 2 weeks' time. So safe travels and speak to you soon. Take care.